We have decided to just do a very, very brief gathering here on Discord. And I'm so happy to see that so many people are here on the Discord. And of course, I think all of you know that we also have our congregation here as well. So thank you all for being here. We have truly a remarkable movement. It's not a massive movement. It's not a mass movement. It's not a movement that focuses on quantity in any way whatsoever. Oh, quantity will be there, and indeed, it's amazing how over the last even just 5 years, the quantity has increased, without exaggeration, tenfold, actually, in just the last roughly 5-6 years, something like that. We focus on quality. We focus on quality. So we're not a massive movement right now, but we are a movement nonetheless. And what does a movement mean? People know that, well, of course, this being a spiritual movement, not just a spiritual movement, this being a movement that is dedicated to authentic Sanatana Dharma, traditional Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana Dharma, not even in the way that it's been practiced or understood in even the last 200 years, but the way that it was understood 6,000 years ago. What we are doing is something the nature of which is in actuality an impossibility. We are attempting in our own way to replicate the Dvapara Yuga within the midst of the very worst era of the Kali Yuga. Now, this might seem to some like a fool's errand. Indeed, the way I just stated it, a person would say, well, why would you even attempt something that you yourself are saying is almost impossible? Well, it's similar to our wanting to know God. With our wanting to know God, I've said this many times before. How is it possible for we as finite beings to know that which is infinite? It is not possible, actually. It is impossible, except through the grace of the infinite. In the same way, truthfully, what we're trying to do with this movement is something that really should be impossible, because this is the Kali Yuga. We're living in an era where we have men with beards dressed in women's dresses and with makeup on being invited by government officials to go into public schools with 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds and reading them books and trying to pretend that this is not insanity. This is the era in which we're living. Oh, and that's just one example of 1,000 that I can give. This is the nature of our era, and yet we are attempting to replicate the Dvapara Yuga, an era in which Krishna himself was here, an era in which we had warriors, the likes of which a modern-day army today could not take down one of these warriors. We're talking about an era, the Dvapara Yuga, in which sages and rishis were plentiful, where if you ventured deep enough into a forest, you most likely eventually would stumble upon what's called an ashrama, a hermitage, where you would see a sage with light beaming from him. That was the Dvapara Yuga. And what we are attempting to do with this movement known as the International Sanatana Dharma Society, we are attempting to replicate the Dvapara Yuga today. Despite the drag queen story hours, despite the degeneracy that we see around, despite the fact that there are 100 million incels in America, despite the fact. So indeed, is the ISDS trying to do the impossible? Oh yes, in fact, as the leader of the ISDS, I'm the first to admit it. And yet we will do it. And yet it will be done. You know, as I've said many times, it was Julius Evola who said that we must ride the tiger. In other words, we must just keep our heads down in the midst of the degeneracy of the Kali Yuga and just hope that we don't get hurt. Well, maybe in the 50s when he first wrote this, early 50s, maybe then that made sense. But I have said that no, we will subdue the tiger of the Kali Yuga. And for a short time, not forever, for a short time, we will have a mini golden age, and we will replicate the Dvapara Yuga in this age. So this is the nature of the ISDS. When people think of something like the ISDS, this is certainly a guru-oriented movement, as should be any, again, legitimate Vedic movement. That was ISKCON when Prabhupada was here. That was Gaudiya Mata when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was here, etc., etc., etc. However, let me tell you, I personally, as the guru of the ISDS, I am always supremely aware of the fact that one person is not a movement. I, myself, even with this vast dream that I've had all of my life, of, like I keep saying, replicating the Dvapara Yuga here in the Kali Yuga, I couldn't do it myself. A movement, by definition, is a grouping of people, all of whom are on the same page, all of whom share the same vision, all of whom have the same goal in mind, all of whom share really one heart. Not one mind. No, that would eliminate our individuality. But we share one heart. And that is, we want to restore Dharma to this world. So getting back to what I was saying, this is why I want to start by first and foremost thanking all of you. We have so many people who indeed volunteer in one way or another. Let me tell you, we have so many people who have helped in so many ways, big and small, to make the ISDS into exactly what it is, a movement. So while I appreciate the fact that so many people will see me as the heart of the ISDS, which again is actually proper Vedically. That is how the Guru should be seen. Truthfully, from the Guru's perspective, from my perspective, no, all of you are the ISDS. You're doing everything that you can to help us, and for that I thank you. I thank you, I thank you. And with that, I'm not going to take too much time, but let's say maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And I wanted to see, does anyone have any questions that I can answer for you? You can either ask your questions in the chat, or else you can feel free to just unmute yourself. I do see a question here from Noah, and it is Namaste Sri Acharyaji regarding living a dharmic life with the limitations of disability, having CP, cerebral palsy, I assume. How can we deal with mobility constraints and overall more limited independence? Very good, excellent question, and very important question actually. Because of course, those of us who don't necessarily have a disability sometimes will forget that, oh, there are millions of individuals throughout the world who do indeed have one disability or another that they have to contend with. You know, and it makes everything more difficult, including, bluntly, and let me say this honestly, including even spiritual life. It makes all of life more difficult. And let me say, first of all, just generally speaking, even if an individual does have a disability, and of any sort, oh, it can be blindness, deafness, it can be any sort of issue like this, it can even be something psychological, oh, deep depression or something. Let me say that this is the nature of spirituality, true spirituality, is that there is no disability that can fully prevent an individual from making spiritual progress. So this is why anyone who has any form of disability, oh, never lose hope. Never lose hope. You can always make spiritual progress, because this is the nature of spirituality, is that by its nature, it is something that is interior, more so than anything. Oh, sure, there are exterior physical things that we do as well that help with the interior. So, for example, we offer obeisances. Oh, but let's say that again, physically you can't. Or we do puja. Well, let's say that's difficult. You know, anything like this. Doing sadhana might be a little bit difficult, etc. Well, you know, these difficulties may be there, but nonetheless, again, it is the internal. The external simply exists to serve the internal spiritually. That being the case, oh, let's say, and again, I'll give these practical examples. Let's say someone cannot offer full Dandavata obeisances, in the way that we do in the ISDS. Then you just don't do it. You do it in your mind. You do it with your intention. You do obeisance of intentionality. And that's good enough. And again, I can give many examples. Physically, let's say you cannot do something. Well, you do so with intention. Let's say that an individual is blind and you cannot see the beauty of the murtis. That's all right. Listen to the beauty of the sound of God's name, and on and on. So you make whatever adjustments need to be made in such a way that you work on the interior, that you work on developing as much devotion as possible, as much bhakti as possible. And in the meantime, if you can, if they are available, you use whatever tools are there to help you. So again, someone needs to be in a wheelchair. If you can afford it, get the best wheelchair you can. Make yourself mobile, and on and on. You use whatever tools you can. You have the best tools available to you to make sure that you do the best that you can. And that's it. You don't worry, you be detached, and you work on what you are becoming within. So I hope, Noah, that answers the question for you. Very good. First of all, here is Krishna's flute. Krishna's flute, namaste. It is absolutely wonderful to see you here. I hope that you're doing well in every way. And you say here, Jaya Shri Guru, Namaste Sri Acharyaji. I wish to ask a question which is a bit off topic. My sister has gifted me with a Rudraksha mala bracelet that she bought at a temple in India. Is it okay to wear it as a Vaishnava? Are there any energetic or karmic reasons not to wear it? Thank you. Let me answer this question in depth and extremely accurately. Actually, very, very accurately. First of all, let me give the actual answer. Your sister gave this to you. She gave this to you as something that she got at a temple in India. This is your sister. She gave it to you out of love. For that reason alone, you should wear it. But now let me give you the theological background to this. Indeed, the Rudraksha beads are worn primarily by devotees of Shiva. Not necessarily Shaivas per se, but if an individual has an affection towards Shiva, they may wear Rudraksha either around their neck or as a bracelet or something like this. We know that Vaishnavas, of course, will tend to wear Tulasi beads. And for the same reason, that as individuals who are devotees of Krishna, of Narayana, etc., that we wish to show our affection. Now, that generally is the case. What happened historically was, and this especially occurred after Ramanuja left the planet, and I know the full history of this, because I know the full history of the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya almost day by day for the last 1200 years. I know the full history. Soon after Ramanuja left the planet, several of his disciples, in their enthusiasm, made it somewhat taboo for Vaishnavas in the Sri Vaishnava lineage to either, what to speak of wearing Rudraksha beads, to even visit a Shiva temple. Now, that of course is silly. That is a form of sectarianism which, even though in the name of Vaishnava Dharma, is again silly. Shiva is the greatest Vaishnava. He is the greatest devotee of Krishna, of Narayana. There have always been Shiva temples, devotees of Shiva, Shiva Linga, Nataraja, images of Shiva. Oh, forget about India. No. You find these in Vietnam. There are Vietnamese Shiva temples going back to the 9th century. You find them throughout Southeast Asia. You find them in Afghanistan. You find them in Central Asia. So Shiva temples, Shiva himself, Rudraksha beads, etc., are all a part of Vedic culture. So to be that sectarian is indeed something that sadly historically crept into Vaishnavism. It should not have. It was due to overzealousness. The truth of the matter is, even as a Vaishnava, if a Vaishnava has a reason, now this is what's important, has a reason to wear, let's say, a Rudraksha mala on their hand, What does that mean? Oh, Lord Shiva himself blessed them somehow. They had a vision of Shiva, or it was given to them by someone either saintly, or by one's sister, or by one's parents, etc. There's nothing wrong with wearing Rudraksha. You are wearing beads that are sacred to one of the greatest of all Vaishnavas, Shiva Mahadeva himself. So, yes, I hope that answers the question for you. This is not a matter of radical universalism. You see, if you asked, can I wear a cross around my neck? That's a different story. The answer is no. The answer is no. Then if that were the case, if you call yourself a strict follower of Sanatana Dharma, a Vaishnava, and you're wearing a cross around your neck and reciting the rosary to Mary, well, there's something wrong with your understanding, and that's putting it lightly. But no, we're talking about something within the milieu of Vedic culture, so nothing wrong with this. All right, with that, I see a message from Noah. Thank you, Gurudeva. Absolutely my pleasure. I hope that was helpful. There is nothing that bars us from expressing bhakti, expressing devotion. Nothing. Mentally, physically, our environment, or what to speak of something afflicting ourselves, our environment. I've told people, if you have a choice and you're living in a hellish, hellscape city, get out. But let's say a person has no choice. Let's say they find themselves in poverty. They are stuck in an apartment with, if this was a hellish landscape, they'd have 5 roommates. But they're stuck there. They can't just leave. They don't have money, etc. That being the situation, that person should just do what they can to make spiritual progress there. With enough devotion, honesty, sincerity, you can make spiritual progress. Better to leave and live someplace where you can see trees. That's better. But let's say you can't. Well, you do what you can. There's nothing that bars us whatsoever. Actually, we have a question here from Mitch. Very quickly, let me just say, Mitch is visiting us from Australia. So those individuals on Discord who are living in Australia right now, one of your compatriots is here with us in the temple. But nice and loud, Mitch. Go ahead.
Thank you. I can't remember the full verse, but I read it recently in the Srimad Bhagavatam again, and the verse was, Bhakti dissolves the subtle body. And it was a short one, but could you comment on that? Because Prabhupada had a massive pedigree on it, but it seemed like an important verse.
Yes.
Just a bit more
understanding of it. Excellent question. Let me say, for those who may not have heard, Mitch was asking, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, he read a verse in which it says something to the effect of, when you practice bhakti, that this dissolves the subtle body, which is a good thing. And then Prabhupada had a very long purport, so he wanted me to comment on this. Definitely. Well, that is absolutely true. Very, very quickly, again, just to recap this, the human person, as we find human beings within the world, it's better philosophically to say the human person. When you're talking about humans in this philosophical context, you have to use that term. The human person has 3 forms, three rupams, 3 forms. There is obviously the physical body that is made of matter. There is the subtle body, which is made of everything energetic. So what does that mean? The psyche. It is comprised of mind, it is comprised of intellect, of ego, but more than this, also many, many subtle energies. Prana is there. The energies that are unleashed when we raise Kundalini, etc. That's what's meant by subtle body. And then the 3rd form is our actual Atman. So those are the 3 forms. So you're saying that in this verse it says that the subtle body, dissolves. Yes, that is indeed the case. And let me explain the significance of this. As I've said several times, there are many people who, and often it's not their fault, they don't know any better. They get information wherever they can get information today, which means what? The internet, where you have 10,000 voices debating whether 1 + 1 = 2, what to speak of anything deeper than that. So this is where people get their information. So a lot of people think that doing things on the subtle plane, with that second form, is what it means to be spiritual. And as I've explained many times, that is not the case. While it is certainly much more powerful than the physical and closer to the Atmic self in subtlety, still, the subtle body is not us. The subtle body is temporary, just like the physical body is temporary. If we're going to live to be 108 years old, after 109 years, we're not here. The body's gone. Well, in the same way, that's true for the subtle body as well, except as we reincarnate, it is the subtle body, actually, and not all of it, but the prime components of that Sukshma Sharira that actually goes on from body to body, of course, along with the Atman. Because all of the material components of, again, the person, as they're reincarnating, there has to be continuity. Otherwise, how can there be karma? You see? There has to be some continuity. It's not that they leave even 100% of the subtle body behind upon death, and then, they literally start afresh with a new body. No, there has to be some continuity. That's the subtle aspect that continues from body to body to body to body. That includes the anartas, that is the various internal faults and problems that are there. That includes the sanskaras, that is the psychic impressions that we have had and that we have retained for, in some cases, many, many lifetimes. That's all part of this subtle realm that we're talking about. But what is the important point? It's all material. It's all material. The mind is material, says Sutler. The intellect is material. False sense, very important, false sense of identity is material. The sanskaras, the anartas, karma itself, while that has more continuity from lifetime to lifetime, it's material. So this is the case also with the chakras, with kundalini, etc., etc. Now the thing is, there is continuity, so thus the subtle body is part of what keeps us entrapped in the material world. See, what keeps us entrapped here? We initially found ourselves under the illusion that we can create something that has nothing as its foundation. You see? This is what made us fall into the material world to begin with. That's called ahankara, that's called ego. We had this idea that we could take something that was unreal and, I'm going to make it real nonetheless because I choose to. Thus, we created an artificial everything, an artificial I, an artificial self, and thus an artificial reality to serve that artificial self. So that includes physical body, that includes subtle body. Now, when we embark upon the path of bhakti, what ends up happening is that as we develop more and more devotion toward Sriman Narayana, it comes to the point where we begin to leave all of these subtle bondages behind. So again, what are some of the things that I mentioned? I mentioned sanskaras. Sanskara is an interesting word. Sanskara in Sanskrita means impression. What does this mean? An individual, just in any given life, let's say in this life, how old are you?
29.
In 29 years, have you not had things happen to you, good and bad, that have left an impression upon your psyche?
Yep.
Traumas or some wonderful experience. Those are the sanskaras. Those are impressions that are literally, it's almost like a record player. I have a record player now, thankfully. Thanks to Krishna Prasada, I have many, many classical albums to listen to now. But there are grooves that are there. And that's where the information is contained. You look at a record album, you don't see anything. It's like, where's the music? They're in the grooves. You put the needle on there, now suddenly the music comes to life. In the same way, the psyche has impressions upon it. And they are all these good and bad impressions that we have had, but it's all material. It's all, some experience that I had 3 lifetimes ago when, let me give a terrible example. I was 10 years old and, some bigger kid bullied me and, punched me in my face. That was traumatic. I still kind of remember it, these several lifetimes later. Well, these are all the things that are keeping us in bondage. So thus, when we develop bhakti, when we begin to know our true selves, when we begin to unfold, to unleash who and what we truly are as this pure and beautiful and wonderful and in its own way perfect Atman, what begins to happen is we begin to let go of those psychic impressions. The good and the bad, actually, because the good ones Oh, I had, let's say in this lifetime, oh, when I was 12 years old, I had the best banana split I ever had in my life, and I still remember it to this. That's a sanskara. That's a material impression. It's meaningless. We begin to let go of all these. But then more, when we begin to know our Atman, it is like a sun begins to arise within us. But then when we begin to know God, it is as if 1,000 suns have arisen simultaneously. And when this happens, we let go of all these subtleties that have been keeping us really psychically in bondage. See, we know the physical body can, in many ways, keep us in bondage. Oh, it doesn't matter how much you work out, how healthy you are. You're in bondage. You can only reach so far with your arms. You can't fly. Every day I wish I could fly. You can't fly. And I can give 1,000 other examples. The physical body keeps you in bondage. But then what to speak of even subtler, the things of the mind, the things of the psyche. They keep us bound to materiality and to ignorance. This being the case, when that sun arises, first of our own true self, but then that experience that is like the arising of 1,000 suns simultaneously when we begin to know God and we start to have devotion toward God. That experience alone, yes, begins to eliminate all these subtle traps and bondages that are there, to the point where eventually it comes to the point where all the bondages are gone, the psychic ones, and then even the physical ones. Oh, and then, figuratively and literally, spiritually, we can fly. We're free. We're freer than the birds that we see flying high up in the skies. We're even freer than them. That is what liberation means. And even that's only a glimpse. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you.
Very good. Very nice. Some more questions and comments here. First of all, again, Krishna's flute makes the comment, "Thank you so much, Sri Acharyaji, for the in-depth explanation. Jaya Shri Gurudev." Thank you for that wonderful comment. But this is from Chandranil, and Chandranil, namaste. It is wonderful to see you here, and it is, namaste, dearest Acharyaji. Can focusing on physical sensations somehow help us in some manner, either spiritually or psychologically? This is a very, very good question. And someone asked me something slightly to this effect, and of course, I gave them a way too long and very in-depth answer to their question. Let me answer this for you. First of all, there are indeed the various aspects of who we are. So again, dealing with the human person, we know we have body, we have emotions, we have mind, we have intellect, we have sense of identity, and then ultimately we have our true self. We have our Atman. This being the case, that is with ourselves being multidimensional beings, this is the problem that some people will fall into, and that is focusing in an unhealthy way and too much on only one of these. And we see this all the time. You'll see people who you see this person and their activities on a day-to-day basis, and oh yes, the person is convinced that they are the body. They live as if their body is the only thing that exists for them. All they care about is, oh, how good do I look today? And yes, working out, but oh, not for health, not for strength, but just so I can look good. And if it's a young guy, oh yes, I just want to attract women, or vice versa, etc., etc. And they live as if they are the body. Well, that's a very unhealthy thing to do. Why? Again, the body is only one aspect of who we are. Let me give more examples. People who are hyper-emotional, to the point where you can ask them, oh, excuse me, do you know the time right now? They'll break down crying. I'm exaggerating slightly, but not by much. There are people who they live in their emotions. They allow their emotions to rule them. They believe that they are the emotions. Oh, I get the slightest sensation of unhappiness coming about. All right, the entire universe is nothing but horrible, and etc., etc. They live in their emotions. Have we heard of people being too mental? Of course, they live in their mind. And I can go on and on. Egotistical are the people who are narcissistic sociopaths, in other words, egotistic to the point of insanity. Yeah. So to hyper focus on any one of these in that way is of course extremely unhealthy. At the same time, I forget who it was who I was speaking to at the time. I think I surprised them when I said something to the effect of, but at the same time, understanding the nature of your reality, of who you truly are, that you have these different dimensions, but ultimately you are Atman. Understanding this, whatever you are doing at the time, it is good to, in a healthy way, focus upon that. So in other words, yes, you're going to the gym, or you're doing asanas. Focus indeed on the physicality of it. Focus on your breath, on your breathing. Focus on the sensations. Focus on, okay, is there discomfort? All right, is it just normal discomfort that I should feel? Oh, let's say lifting some weights, or is it something truly painful where it's harming me? Oh, you need to be focused in a healthy way. The same thing with the mind. It's good to analyze one's mind substance, one's chitta, mind substance, a little bit. But again, to not get lost in it. I've said in the past, even a great yogi can express emotions, but not get lost in the emotions, not think you are the emotions. But something legitimately happens to make you sad, allow yourself to be sad, etc. And I can go on and on, but I hope people get the idea. With whatever aspect of yourself you're dealing with at that time, yes, it's good to focus. What does it mean to be a yogi? It means many things, but this is something I've said in the past. What is a yogi? What is an individual who is a sage? It is someone who is aware. An individual who wants to seriously practice yoga sadhana. And again, I do mean the asanas, but I also mean pranayama, and I mean the yamas and niyamas, and I mean dharana and dhyana and samadhi and all of the aspects of yoga. What it means is that you are working on supreme awareness. When you meet a sage, you meet someone who, when you're in their presence, you may or may not detect this about them. That's because you're not aware. But if you were truly observing this person, what you would observe would be an individual who, as they're speaking to you, they are aware supremely of who they are. They are aware of God. They are present with them. They are aware of you as the listener. They are aware of what is happening in that room. They are aware of every sound, of everything that is happening. They have awareness. Indeed. What is this true story? Actually, it's well known, and I've even given this story once or twice in my talks on YouTube, that when Gautama achieved nirvana, he comes out of the forest and he meets several individuals, interestingly, who knew him previously. They were fellow yogis who had practiced with him. He knew them, they knew him, but they didn't recognize him because he had changed. And as he's approaching them, they see this being of light and peace walk toward them. And because they can't even recognize him, they say, Sir, who are you? And he says, Aham Buddhasmi. Aham Buddhasmi. Me? I am awake. I am awake. Buddha. Buddha means awake. It also means awareness. It means both. I am he who is aware. So Chandranil, sorry for such a long answer. But you ask, can focusing on physical sensations help us? When you're doing physical things, then yes. Absolutely. I hope that answers your question. And Noah here says, Aham Buddhasmi. Very nice. That is the Sanskrit. Namaste, Sri Acharyaji. Please accept my respectful obeisances, and likewise. During Shivaratri, like the one that has that was just recently. Is it proper and should a Vaishnava in honor of Mahadeva keep a fast and stay awake at night on such an occasion? Good question, and let me answer this again definitively. A Vaishnava does not have to, but if a Vaishnava does, there's absolutely nothing wrong with this. This is something that, again, primarily Shaivas do. If a Vaishnava has an affinity toward, feels a closeness to Lord Shiva, then they certainly can do this as well. They do not have to. It's not a religious prescription in which they have to do this, but certainly they can, and it will only be of benefit to do this. For people who don't know, on Shiva Ratri, it's usually the custom that, again, especially for serious devotees of Shiva, they will go to a Shiva Mandira, and they will stay up the entire night. And they will, it depends on which temple you're at, they will do bhajan, they will meditate, they will do many different things, etc. It's a very good practical question. Namaste, Sri Acharyaji. My obeisances unto you. What is the best way to incorporate my Tulasi plant into my daily puja? Very nice. And let me say, I don't know what your temple area or your altar area is like, but what would be nice is if you indeed have a Tulasi plant, it would be nice to keep her near the altar. And it's actually quite simple. In many Vaishnava temples, there will be Tulasi plants where they can keep them. In northern climates, it's very difficult because this is a tropical plant. She needs constant heat and light. But for those individuals who can have a Tulasi plant, you want to have her near the altar as much as possible. Probably not on the altar because, as you water her, water might spill out or something like that. And you simply do a puja. In the same way that you do a puja to Sriman Narayana, to Krishna, etc., you do a puja to her. You want to be very, very respectful. There are some things you do, some things you do not do. Of course, a Tulasi plant, like anything sacred, is not brought into the bathroom, is not put directly on the floor if it can be avoided. Now, if, in traditional temples, they'll do several things to avoid this. So, for example, if the flower pot is so large to the point where it's not possible really for the roots to even get to the bottom of the pot, then it's not a concern. But if you have a smaller pot, you try not to keep her on the floor. Even if you have a small platform, some bricks, anything between the floor and the pot, just anything like that you tend to do. It is perfectly acceptable to once in a while take a leaf from the Tulasi plant and add it to your offerings when you do puja to Sriman Narayana. Indeed, if you offer food and you have a Tulasi plant, you take a little leaf, you put it on top of the food, and then you offer it. That's the tradition, and I can go on and on. But when you have a Tulasi plant who is consecrated, in other words, who you are actually worshiping on a daily basis, you treat this like a murti. You treat this like a murti. At this point, you understand this is the personality. It's not a plant. It is the personality. So I hope that helps. Chandranil says, Dhanyavada. Sri Acharyaji, you answered my question wonderfully. Good, wonderful. You say here, Namaste, Sri Acharyaji. I am struggling with engaging in relationships in a dharmic manner, comprising what I understand is ideal as described in the Vedas and by yourself for what I observe that succeeds in modernity. I am concerned that I may fail in my duties to start a healthy family, waiting for some soulmate, artificially limiting my options due to ignorance of proper criteria, or worse, creating a broken home due to my choices against the ideal or with a poor choice in wife. Would you please explain what we as Vaishnavas should absolutely should not compromise with toward our partners? Excellent question, actually. In fact, first, you know you're not alone. This is one of the curses of the last, just a few generations, like two. Like roughly the last 2 generations, maybe 3, but really especially in recent years, like let's say the last 40 years, that, oh my God, the idea of a good and decent man and a good and decent woman coming together, having like interests, who have values, both of whom have good virtues, and they love each other for the sake of loving each other. It's not just so, they were hooking up with multiple people, and I think I could maybe live with this one. No. People truly loving each other, getting married, having children, being together, and for hopefully decades and decades until one of them finally passes away. This is something that has become increasingly, almost day by day, harder and harder and harder to attain. To the point where we know, oh my Lord, it's become so hard to attain, and artificially so, to the point where how many people have given up? Millions. It's truly amazing. People have just given up on the idea of even finding someone, in America as well. We have radical feminists who think all men are evil incarnate. We have the opposite. We have the MGTOW bunch, which one day I'll give an actual talk, philosophical talk, a real philosophical talk, not internet philosophy. So many MGTOW people think that they're intelligent and they're actually dealing with philosophy. Someday I'll give an actual philosophical talk on why MGTOW is wrong, and how much of what they're observing is true in that there are problems, but they think that the problem is, that inherently women are bad. Just like some radical feminists think that the problem is that inherently men are bad. Not understanding that, no, society has become a degenerate hellscape, and that on purpose. And as a result, relationships today, healthy relationships, are hard to come by. This is what you and what individuals in the ISDS have to do. What are we? What are we doing? I kind of expressed it before at the very beginning. We are individuals in the Kali Yuga trying to live a Dvapara Yuga lifestyle. We are individuals living in this truly horrific dark age, but trying to live within as if we are the noble beings living within a golden age. Now, this doesn't make things necessarily, it can, but it doesn't necessarily make things easier for us. But let me tell you what it does do. It makes everything infinitely more joyful for us. Even as we're having difficulties, even as, we're practicing Sanatana Dharma, but we're still having some difficulty finding someone. At least we're not hopeless. At least we know that, I may still be having difficulties because of this crazy age. But despite that, I do not lose hope. See, the others do. That's why, again, feminists, MGTOW, incel, etc., etc., etc. Those are the ones who gave up hope. We do not lose hope. Rather, we do indeed have high standards. Let me cut to the chase and tell you, yes, you are to have high standards and you are to not settle. It doesn't mean that you are to necessarily find someone perfect. It means that you are to have high standards and you are not to settle. You must find someone who indeed shares what you are in all of the main areas of concern. Do you all have to like the exact same music, the exact same bands, the exact same movies, etc.? No, of course not. That's trivial. That helps. The more things you have alike that you like, the better. But no, it's the essential things. That is number one. And this is true for men or women. When you're looking for a partner, number one, look for someone who has inherent virtue. Look for someone who you just know, this is someone who was born good. They're not someone who they needed to be told, you should do this to be good. No, they just know. They just know inherently. Find that sort of person. That's number one. Number two, find someone who indeed is spiritual. And when I say spiritual, everyone is in a different place along the path when it comes to spirituality. Doesn't mean that you have to find a woman who is a yogini right now. But find someone who is indeed spiritual, who wants to know God, who wants to know herself, who wants to improve herself. Find someone who shares the same vision with you as far as what they want to have in a relationship and in a marriage. Number one, find someone who wants to get married. When you find someone and they're one of these people, no, I don't believe in marriage. I don't think I ever want, get away from that person. Find someone who wants to get married and who wants to plan a life with you. Find someone who wants to plan a life with you. And that plan, when both of you look at it, it's a beautiful plan, etc. See, these are the basic things that one should look for. You asked this very nicely. Would you please explain what we as Vaishnavas should absolutely not compromise with toward our partners? These are them. These are them. Now, again, getting back to the spiritual. The person should be spiritual. They may not be 100% interested right now or know anything about Sanatana Dharma. That's all right. That's your job. That's your job. And again, not to preach to them to death to the point where you chase them away, to in a very compassionate, loving way because you care about the person. You are to teach them about Sanatana Dharma. You are to practice with them. You are to do actual sadhana with them. You are to explain to them, oh, this is what we do and this is what we believe, etc. And to the point where even spiritually you are both on the same page. And this is important. It's unfortunate. I think a person only asked me this once and I gave the answer, but I should state this more often. You must be married to someone who shares your same religion. I know this is America in 2024 and people will say the opposite. Oh, as long as you are fill in the blank. As long as you're sincere, you're a nice person, etc. Oh yes, a Christian can marry a Buddhist can marry a Muslim, and oh, it doesn't really matter, just as long as you're both nice people, etc. That works if neither party really cares that much about religion. And it's just a word to them. Oh, I'm Buddhist. Well, I know nothing about it. I don't practice it. Yeah, I guess I'm Buddhist, so I'm going to marry a Muslim. It doesn't matter. Oh, yeah, it doesn't matter. But then nothing else in your life will either. But no, the idea of a religious X marrying a religious Y and both of them are going to get together, are going to get along long term, guaranteed to fail. So indeed, you must find someone who, they may not be a follower of Sanatana Dharma right now, but they have to be open-minded enough and they have to trust you enough that they will begin to practice Sanatana Dharma. And you don't marry them until that point comes. So very important. So this is ultimately what it comes down to, is that yes, you must not compromise. You don't have to look for absolute perfection either. They don't have to be a clone of you, just opposite gender. No, you don't need that. But you also should not compromise on these important things and be patient. Please be patient. Understand that this is the other thing. If you are someone who you are virtuous, if you are someone who you are a deep individual, who strives always for what is of meaning in this world and what is of importance in this world, and you are a spiritual person, and you are, very important, again, a sattvic person, someone who you are healthy, you're a clean individual, you're a pure individual, trust me, you will not have difficulty finding someone. Because the truth of the matter is, whatever the gender, if a person fits that bill, if it's a woman and they are what I just described, good men will flock to that woman, and vice versa. If you have a man who they are everything that I just described, that man will have difficulty keeping good women away from him. So this would be my advice to you. I thank you all again for being here, our congregation of individuals who are here, and the individuals who joined us here on Discord as well. I'm very happy that you could all join us. Jaya Shriman Narayana.
Jaya Shriman Narayana.
Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna.
Jaya
Bhagavan Shri Krishna.
Jaya Shri Guru.
Jaya
Shri Guru.
Sanatana Dharma Jayate.
Sanatana
Jayate.
Dharma Rashtra Jayate.
Dharma
Jayate.
Surya Vangsha Jayate.
Surya
International Sanatana Dharma Society, Jayate.
International Sanatana Dharma Society.
Evam Bhavatu. May such victory be so, and so it shall be. Dharma will be ever victorious. Dharma will be ever victorious.